Hey Ravens fans! There's been some news and analysis recently that has sparked a lot of discussion following our last matchup, so let's get into that. But before we get into today's hot topic, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss any Ravens news or updates. Trust me, you're going to want to stay in the loop, especially with everything going on right now. Okay, let's talk about what's been buzzing all over the sports media. Lamar Jackson, our star quarterback, has been under fire. After starting the season 0-2, there's been a lot of finger-pointing, but the spotlight is now on Jackson. Recently on ESPN's First Take, Stephen A. Smith didn't hold back. He flat out said that Lamar, as the two-time MVP and leader of this team, needs to be held accountable for the Ravens' struggles. Smith's main point? Jackson has had opportunities to close games, especially when Baltimore had a 10-point lead in the fourth quarter with just 12 minutes left in the last game. That's when, according to Stephen A., Lamar needed to step up, and he didn't. Smith went on to say, "You've got your scholarship, you've got MVP stature, you're the guy, now go figure." Pretty harsh, right? He even questioned how many fourth-quarter leads the Ravens can blow before Jackson takes the fall for not closing those games. This isn't the first time Baltimore has blown a late lead. In fact, in the past 5 seasons, the Ravens have blown 10 games in which they led by 7 or more points in the fourth quarter, by far the most in the league. 5 of those losses have come since 2022 alone. That statistic stings, doesn't it? And of course, when you're the face of the franchise, the blame tends to fall on your shoulders. Now, here's where I think we need to slow down a bit. Is Lamar Jackson perfect? No, of course not. Could he have made better decisions late in the game? Absolutely. But putting all the blame on him seems a bit misguided, if you ask me. If you've been watching the games, you know it's not just Lamar. The Ravens have been plagued by penalties, a shaky offensive line, and even Justin Tucker missing a few long-range field goals. All of these things combined have made it difficult for Baltimore to close out games. So while Jackson still isn't playing at an MVP level, it's not entirely his fault. Take, for example, the last drive after the Raiders tied the game at 23-23. The Ravens had a chance to go down the field and win the game, but on the first play, Max Crosby came up and tackled Jackson for a 9-yard loss. That's not Lamar, that's the offensive line. That sack completely changed the drive and made it nearly impossible to get any momentum going. It's a perfect example of how the issues surrounding Lamar have held this team back as much, if not more, than his individual play. And let's be real for a second, without Lamar, the Ravens wouldn't even be in these games to begin with. He's been the engine that drives this team. If Baltimore can clean up the penalties, get better protection for Lamar, and stop making these costly mistakes, I have no doubt he'll get back to MVP form. And when that happens, this team can turn things around in a hurry. So, Ravens fans, what do you think? Week 2's 26-23 loss to the Las Vegas Raiders was a tough one to swallow. Blowing another double-digit lead in the fourth quarter is becoming way too familiar, and while the Ravens had some impressive performances, the result was a gut punch. Let's talk about what went right, what went wrong, and how every position group on the defense performed. First up, the outside linebackers. They were absolutely phenomenal, easily the highlight of the game for the Ravens. Odafoa came out swinging, recording a sack on the first play of the game. The guy was everywhere, finishing with 2.5 sacks, 5 total tackles, and 3 quarterback hits. It's crazy that people are hyping up Max Crosby after his big game, but Owa was every bit as good. And let's not forget Kyle Van Noy. He's playing through a fractured orbital bone, yet he still managed 2 sacks and led the team with 3 solo tackles for loss. David Ohabo and Tavius Robinson also contributed pressure, with Ohabo looking strong in both the run game and as a pass rusher. This group gets an A+. Now, the defensive line deserves just as much credit. They were dominant, both in stuffing the run and pressuring the quarterback. Nnamdi Madubuike was a beast, even though he got robbed of a sack on a questionable face mask call. He still managed 3 tackles, 2 of which were for a loss, and a quarterback hit. Travis Jones is really starting to emerge as a force on the interior, consistently flushing quarterbacks into the waiting arms of the outside rushers. Michael Pierce split a sack with Owa and was active up front, and Brent Urban, playing in his first game of the season, also chipped in with 3 tackles. Overall, this group gets an A+ as well. They're living up to their reputation as one of the best defensive lines in the league. Then we get to the inside linebackers, and things get a little more mixed. Roquan Smith, as usual, was all over the field, leading the team with 11 tackles and breaking up a pass. Trenton Simpson was solid too, with 5 tackles. But it wasn't all perfect. There were moments, especially in coverage, where this group struggled, particularly against the Raiders' rookie tight end, Brock Bowers. Malik Harrison missed a key open field tackle, and that kind of play hurt the defense when it mattered most. The inside linebackers get a C, as they were serviceable but not spectacular. Cornerbacks are where things start to unravel. For the first 3 quarters, the group held up fairly well, but the fourth quarter was a different story. Marlon Humphrey came away with an interception in the first half but also gave up the game-tying touchdown to Davante Adams late in the game. Adams, being a 6-time Pro Bowler, isn't easy to cover, but it's clear Humphrey and Brandon Stevens had trouble with him as the game wore on. Defensive coordinator Zach Orr didn't give them much help with safety coverage, and that left them exposed. There were also some questionable pass interference calls that went against the Ravens' corners in crucial moments. Humphrey finished with 10 tackles, which is too many for a cornerback if you ask me, meaning the Raiders were targeting him too often. The cornerbacks get a C+. As for the safeties, they were solid but unspectacular. Kyle Hamilton had 6 tackles, including 5 solos, and almost got a sack on a blitz. Marcus Williams was steady, though he gave up a big 27-yard catch to Bowers that set up a Raiders score. Eddie Jackson didn't make any big plays either, and the backup safeties like A.R. Darius Washington and Sanusi Kane mostly contributed on special teams. It's hard to fault the safeties for anything glaring, but you'd like to see more playmaking from them, especially in games like this. They get a B-. Speaking of special teams, let's talk about Justin Tucker. He's still one of the greatest to ever do it, but he's been struggling from long range. Tucker made all 3 field goals under 50 yards and both extra points, but he missed from beyond 50 again, making him one of 7 from that distance since last season. For a team that's 0-2, they can't afford to keep trotting Tucker out there for 55-yarders if he's not hitting them consistently. His grade? I'll B-, simply because of that miss. Finally, punter Jordan Stout. The Ravens' punting game didn't help much, especially in the second half. Stout averaged 43.3 yards per punt but didn't pin the Raiders inside the 20-yard line on any of them. So, Ravens fans, what do you make of these grades? And as always, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Go Ravens!